Hey, welcome to the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. I'm continuing my journey in 2024 here. This is a light lesson plan on my counts over median metric and updated research 2015 to 2023. Counts over median is a measurement of a player hitting a positional median threshold of the week or not. And if they do, they are given a 1, right? If they don't, then they're given what? A 0. I make a count. How many weeks was a player above or not that threshold? And you have my COM data, very simple metric. It's not necessarily the best or, the most enlightening, but that's kind of a thumbnail, quick, dirty metric of consistency. My partner in crime, D. Mike, has his MVP, his best weekly value, consistency metrics. Those are similar but do different things and measure different aspects. Again, just trying to look for the consistency, if there is one, and try to use that for making forecasts, right? That's what we're all trying to do, is beat the public, beat the ADP, right? Beat your league, right? We don't have to be so good, but good enough, right, to be a little better than those you're playing against. So it's really interesting that way. So I think I've posted my COM data before, other lesson plans. You can check it out, but you can look where I'm at today. Let me go to the first slide here. Okay. This is 2014 to 2023 average of counts over median per game for all quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. And you can convert this to percentage if you wanted. So you could think of it as percentages. And so when I group all, right, every quarterback, the worst to the best, overall you get about a 19% consistency. Running backs, 14.4, tight ends, 14%, wide receivers, basically 15%. So quarterbacks, just the nature, right, you got one quarterback, so you're really looking at less players here, and you're getting 19%. And there's just the grand totals of each year. And I like to just follow the yearly kind of thing. The yearly spectacle gives you an idea about variation, right? Remember that folks look at last year and think that's how it's going to be this year. I think for reference class forecasting methods, it's better to look historically and just kind of see what kind of metrics exist. For instance, quarterbacks, you can see we've had some really good years, 2015, 18, and 20. And look at 2022 was the worst year in, 9 years. So anytime I see that, I always get a little worried. And we should never not think there's a trap getting ready to spring with each draft pick, right? If that makes you more cautious, if that makes you do more research, if that makes you study harder, then that probably is what I like to do, and this inspires me to be cautious, right? Sometimes the best decisions is letting others make the mistakes. So that can be a strategy as well, is not just being so crazy aggressive, but just kind of stay in the course and pick your shots there. And again, draft plans, looking at your draft diary. How do you behave under your draft situations? Historically, are you great at picking quarterbacks, but not so great at tight ends? That kind of thing. You need to know yourself, right? And of course, we're not even talking the psych game and thinking about thinking and human biases, all right, heuristical biases that we all have. There's a lot of things going for and against you in a draft, right? I like to do slow drafts, give myself, some would say, more time to make a mistake. But, it is what it is. But here's the data showing variation. Just be aware that historically wide receivers tend to be a little bit more consistent than running backs, and tight ends tend to be a little bit less consistent. Now, is that statistically significant? I haven't tested. Don't know if I'd even have to think about how we tell. I don't know if it's a chi-square, or because I don't know really what's the expectation of all that. It'd have to do more work than I want to do for this, right? Yeah, if I was paid serious money or had ESPN interns working for me, then yeah, I could go down that rabbit hole. But this is what the data is. If you look at just the trend lines, I did some trend lines. I like polynomial trend lines. I think they're a little bit more realistic. They don't smooth it out. And it shows the roller coasterness that is the position. And the green is quarterbacks. And if you look at the roller coaster, is very extreme in each year's quarterback class, whether that's, I don't know, the weather, the schedule, the group of people that were playing, whatever it is. But quarterbacks tend to be a lot more up and down on consistency in some ways, even though they're higher in the actual being consistent, but the year to year is very dramatic. The other positions tend to be a lot smoother in the consistency if you look at the trend lines there. So one part of me would say seeing quarterbacks and given the Bush figure that I created, looking at the weekly score in another way, quarterbacks are very critical for your one quarterback team. So given this pattern, given the changes that can occur year to year, the idea of how you draft a quarterback is critical. And drafting an elite quarterback early is seems to be a good idea. And historically, in my other lessons for ADP versus end of the season, kind of before and after, the data suggests that after about the 6th round, you're probably starting to get really in the deep hole for quarterbacks. So my general plan is I want an early quarterback somewhere before or at the 6th round. Okay, and you can see my other lesson plans for running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. I've detailed that. Okay. Another way to look at it is kind of the after. And the ranked sector data is at the end of the year, how did, how is the distribution going? what's the quarterback in the 25th to 49th percentile, 50th to 74th, or the top 25%, and what is the average of consistency there. So the previous table, I was looking at everybody. Now I'm breaking the pie up, and you can probably say that the top 25%, we're now talking 40% average, folks. So that's like 40% of 16, what is that? 6-7 weeks. On average, the top 25% quarterbacks are pulling in above median scoring about 7 games out of 16. Average. We're not talking the Josh Allen's the number one. We're just talking average now. Look at running backs, 40%. Tight ends, 40%. Wide receivers, 40%. Running backs get very close to wide receivers at the top 25%. So what that tells me is the distribution of consistency is really wacky in the lower RBs versus WRs, and that makes sense if you've been around fantasy football here, and tight ends especially that as well. So now we only look at the top 25%, and here's the averages here overall. And I forgot to colorize this. I apologize here. So last year we had a pretty good year, 43%. Here's another 43 in 2020, 47. Look at that in 2015. So we had one of the best of the 9 years, the top 3 years, not bad. Tight ends, 40%, not bad. Look at the previous years. Running backs, top 25%, not bad, not bad. Quarterbacks, a little low. Take a look. We've had some great years in the 50%, 46%, 51%. So, if consistency was random, you should not see this kind of stickiness year to year. I know we have some bad years. That's why I like historically, but overall, across. And when you look at the top 25, we do see a roller coaster. But look at running backs are the smoothest as far as that roller coaster here. Quarterbacks, you're still kind of up and down. We had some really great years, and last year not as great. So I just like to be aware, and I think you've got to develop a draft plan for each position based on historical consistency metrics, however you want to measure it here. This is how I measure it. And by the way, this is still beta testing, folks. This is not, I'm dying in this ditch at all. I'm still waiting for something better, but this is me testing this, right? So that always be testing. If I had to say one thing about fantasy football researchers, you should always be testing. What's the better thing? What can I tweak it? Can I measure it? What is it that I need to do now? I'm here. Can I get better? Right? I mean, I know at the end of the year, do you put money in your pocket? Right? That's the ultimate test. Anyway, I do note that quarterbacks are still, year to year, a lot of variation. And I'm not sure I can tell you why. That's funny. It's like, it's variable, but why is that? And some of the other positions, less variable. Okay. just really, it intrigues me. By the way, 2014-15, if you were doing zero RB, this is, and I've seen this data played out multiple times over multiple years. I've said this. That is why zero RB came into being. People were responding to this kind of situation here. Low consistency, injury, whatever caused it. But look, folks, it's not the same. Like 2022, okay, we might be back to that a little bit, but now we're last year back up. So it looks like even the zero RB as a collective, as a group, is not something you can hang your hat on as a group of us. Now, individually, what's your diary saying? Is that something that puts money in your pocket? Keep doing it. But I'm just saying, when people come up with these different methods, whatever it is, I think a lot of it is due to what's been happening in the last year or two. And that is coloring and affecting what they're doing. You know, I know we want to be resistant to that, resistant to the dramaticness of data and events, right? But as a human, that's what our ancestors, they needed to pay extra attention to something dramatic, right? That probably saved them into dangerous situations, right? Is that the saber-toothed cat in the weeds or just the wind? It's the same concept that I have said multiple lessons. Okay. So now let's look at the player level. And this just shows you my comm data percent-wise. And I have arbitrarily, using the box and whisker distribution of the populations, did a cutoff that my elite comm data is 40%. So that is, what is that? 40% of 16 games. What is that? That's 6 and about 7. Somewhere between 6.5, 7 games. Notice Jace Hurts and Allen were in the 80%. Right? 80%. So we're talking 12, 13 games. So there's your range of the elite quarterbacks, 12 to 13 weeks. Fantasy football is weekly. So just quit pretending like it's not. It is. So if somebody can deliver 13 weeks out of 16 at a certain level, that is critical. I don't care. You can ignore it, whatever. Bottom line, here's the data. If this was random, would there be players that continually show being at this level? It would not. It was like, well, this is all random. It's not random. Okay. Now, I haven't tested with ANOVA. I could, probably should, but I think at this point in May, I'm not going to, but I know exactly how I would test. I would look and gather the comm data for 2014, look at this top group in 2014, and look at 2015's comm data for that group, and compare it to the next level, the so-called next tier, and compare them. And you could then, and then the next group is below 20%. So my levels are 40% or above, 20% to 40, below 20%. So I'd have 3 groups of 3 pots to stir, 3 pots to measure. We would run an ANOVA and do something like Tukey's or something and compare group to group. I suspect it will be significant. Okay, I've done it in a little bit different context and other metrics, but you can check out my lesson plans where I've actually spent the time to do that. And again, I just created this data last week, so I hadn't had time to do this here. So here's the data, 2023, the quarterbacks. And let's see, what am I going to do? I think I'm going to shut this down and start my part 2 coming, just because I think people need a break. I need a break. It's 20 minutes in, so I got to have you reset, go take a beer, and you can come back and listen to part 2. This is Dr. Bush for The Process, Science of Fantasy Football. Is this fun or what?